So now it's time for the Q&A, and keep posting your questions on the YouTube channel and on the VOV channel, and I will read them aloud. To say a few words, so on the most recent project on the educational stuff, how do you, I mean, now we're talking about the quantitative and the qualitative and the methodological questions. So how do you actually approach that field in terms of collecting data? What kind of data do you work on there?
Yeah, so we had the aim that we should start by basically we were dissatisfied with the field, how they treated reading and how they narrowed it down to exactly something that seemed very inhuman and this machine-like idea of information processing. So we aimed at starting very qualitatively, like naive question about what's going on, what are they actually doing, and how does that particular reading setting look like. And then we very soon we figured out that there were things that seemed very important. For instance, that there are so many breaks during the reading. So what's going on there? And then we would see whether we could find any uh, general ideas about what was going on, and not because we want to say what they imagine, but we can say that it occurs and that there's something that goes on there. So the data that we got was basically that we observed for a whole year the preparatory reading, university students preparatory reading over a year. We video recorded that reading, so that was like between 45 minutes and 1.5 hours each time, once a week. And I mean, to be honest, we haven't really been systematic about the way that we've organized or coded these data yet, but that is one of the aims now that we have an idea of where it could be interesting to generate hypotheses and test them further. Then we also have the physiological measure of some of them so that we can see, because we were interested in also the emotional reactions when they're reading things. So, I mean, the things we can observe, whether get excited or frustrated, how does that correlate with the physiological measures that we have as well? Questionnaires, reading diaries. I mean, we really tried to get all kinds of data that could give us the best condition for saying something about not just a particular reading session, but the whole reading person. So there are these biographical narrative interviews with them, whether they grow up in a home with books, and when they started reading, all these kind of questions. So we have like an immense data profile on each of the readers. But to be honest, I can't say that we have the overview about
Okay,
all the data yet. Yeah.
thank you. So let's just check if Bert is.
Do you have
Ah,
sound now?
yes,
All
good.
right, good. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Yes.
So
So back to the question you asked before.
yes, should I just repeat the question? I think I'll just repeat the question.
Okay.
So this is Jasper van den Heerdik, who asks, you introduce the values in I terms, giving the impression that all of this is explicitly deliberative on a personal level for participants. That seems a strong assumption. At least sometimes it seems people may be unaware of values that nevertheless constrain them in a concrete situation. Do we make room for that kind of unreflective constraints?
Yeah, I actually think that's the standard case. I think very seldom is it deliberative. It's not that we never do that. We are self-conscious sometimes about it, and we might. If you're in an Ash dilemma, that's a very awkward situation. So people might well be aware of some of it, but I don't think most of them ever sit there and think about truth or justice or social solidarity or anything of the sort. In fact, they might find that description of their activity strange. It's not phenomenological, I think, at all. I think one of the problems I have with so much of social psychology is they expect sort of standard popular notions of the way we consciously think about things to be the actual explanatory concepts by which we think behavior is guided and organized. And it just doesn't make sense. I mean, values wouldn't do that any more than you're sitting around thinking about grammatical rules if you believe language is rule governed, which lots of people, of course, have claimed. You're not aware of the rules, and you're certainly not aware of values, I think, most of the time in that way. So
Thank you. But I'll just give you one more question from Jill Bruneberg, who asked, so thank you, Bert. A question, given that values are ecological and part of the ecosystem, can people participate to a more or lesser extent to some of those values, especially when there is a possible conflict? Does that not still give an important individual component to participating in values?
Absolutely. Yeah, our attention to we can attend or not attend appropriately to values. So we can fall short, and we regularly do, in terms of realizing justice or loving someone. We can be oppressive, as Hannah was talking about. So that's the psychological task for us, though, is to attend to the values and to be sensitive to all of the values. And that's a long-term learning process, and it's a communal activity. It's not something we ever do by ourselves. We do it in loving relationships. Again, to go back to Hannah's thing, and by reading good literature, as Sarah was just describing. And in some sense, it's all located in the ontology that Mark is trying to explicate.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so next, Sarah, I have a question for you. This is from Marek McGann, who asks, thank you. He says, first, have you examined that shared practice? You included comments by the child, which is cool. Is there any relationship between reading and the interaction from the adult side too?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, I didn't hear the first.
Okay. Have you examined the shared practice? You included comments by the child, which is cool. Is there any relationship between reading and the interaction from the adult side too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have done that a little bit at least, or I've been doing that in several different kind of settings. So one of them is a shared practice of reading where siblings read together, for instance. So what goes on there? And actually, in the case with the giant pear, the boy reads to his little brother in that particular case. So there's lots of things that goes on in the interaction there. I don't know whether so if the question is whether there is a relation between what goes on as one read independently and when the interaction with a parent or something like that, or a teacher is involved. I mean, of course, the teacher or the adult is a crucial constraint on the imagination that goes on there. And that can be in a very good sense if you want to direct the attention towards something. And it can be, of course, as we see that in education in general, I would say a very negative constraint, because that direction is constrained by a very narrow model of what reading is. So that's why they constantly have you to focus very much on the accuracy in reading aloud, for instance, not looking at the pictures. And you can see the decrease in the joy of reading over time. And I think that's because you actually direct the attention towards specific things in reading, and then it becomes real to the reader that they actually believe that that's one way of reading should be the one that they apply. So in that sense, the interaction is very important in how we scaffold the reading practices. It's a skill that you have to learn. It's not something that comes naturally to you, right? So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Somebody called Mark Bighart had a question, so I'll just read that aloud too. I sometimes talk to students about different manners or kinds of reading. Reading a math book and reading a novel are different. Another example might be reading in order to see what new ideas might be stimulated, compared to reading to learn what an author has to say, compared to reading about a general topic, but not necessarily about this author per se. I'm wondering if the framework you're developing would help make sense of such differences.
Yeah, I think that's a very good comment. I don't know what kind of framework I am developing, but I think indeed that it's very important, and of course that's why we get involved in a text depending on what the aim is, and that's why we have, I think, a need to develop reading strategies. I mean, we shouldn't learn children or adults, even university students, to read in one particular way. And we basically just do that right now. So of course it's very important. I mean, that's the ecological setting, right? With all these kind of constraints, we should know what they do, and we should know about the intentions and how we can actually help fuel imagination, but not so that it becomes some sort of mind wandering. It should, of course, be constrained depending on what the goal is or what the aim is.
Okay. Yes, Sarah, one more question for you, which has to do with the kind of actually, this is like, I'll ask you now two questions because they're kind of related, I think. So one question is, what are the implications of the advocating slow reading for testing achievement? For instance, in England, literacy is measured with the amount of words read per minute without even proper interpunction. And so, and the other one related to that is, here it is. Regarding educational aspects of reading, could reading stories and enacting it to the children from young age help them transform from novice readers into more mature readers? So, so both in terms of testing and in terms of the developmental side of the readers.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that there is. I think it's very important that there's not like one strategy or one right way to read. The problem is in education again that the whole idea about language as a code and the information processing is shaping the educational models that we apply when we teach and also when we test the students. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't focus on accuracy and pronunciation and all these kind of things, but we just see that I mean, there's nothing more exciting than stories and narratives. That's our whole life somehow. And children love that. And eventually, when they're 10 to 12, we can just see that the joy of reading completely decreases. And I think that that's a direct result of the way that we narrows down the attention to focus on very specific things, as for instance, the tests that are in the schools all the time. So when they are alone and or when that's taking in isolation, it becomes a bad thing, right? But if if we just give room for the other things, then I think we could help them develop to be much more creative and see that you can use text for something much more than searching for information. So that's why the arts is something like non-scientific thing, right? It's actually very scientific how you can learn about taking perspectives and you can learn about yourself. And when you actually get these kind of emotional responses when you read, it's very useful. And I think we completely devaluate that effect of reading in education. So it's just a side product that you can do when you're off, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a very nice methodological question, which is from Jelena Klusman, who asked you, so thank you for the fascinating work on reading. I'm curious about the relationship between observations of people reading and including their attention to the embodied action and the post-reading interviews. Do you look at the ways in which bodily action during descriptions of the reading process relate to the reading process or relate to the interview situation? Do you notice if the interview accounts affect the interview accounts affect the reflective interpretations or effective memories of that text?
Yeah. Okay. So that was
Sorry for missing the last part. I hope you got it.
so first of all, yeah, we definitely observe what they are doing, and I think that one of the things that we are trying to deal with right now is the pre-reflective and pre-linguistic judgment that happens on a very very fast time scale as they read. So I think it's important to distinguish between the act of reading and then the more post festum analysis of what have I read and how do I understand that. They're two different things that are often, mixed for the same. So of course, when we ask them afterwards, I mean that that phenomenological report is very important because that's how they understand the reading themselves. It's not necessarily close to what goes on in the reading. So, and of course, that kind of reconstruction of what they have done reflects to a large degree again, what we criticize, the model of what reading really is and how they are taught to read. So they expect to do things according to the reading strategies and the whole model that is implied in education, and they answer that they do these kind of things, but they don't. Often they don't, at least. So of course that's just another kind of data set that we use to
Mm.
criticize the whole way that education works these days, or most of education works. So the good teachers can do the other stuff and encourage them to engage with the text in different ways, but it's more ad hoc, and it's like not a systematic method that they have. It's just an intuitive feeling of engaging the children in a specific way, which is
Okay.
important. So yes, so we do observe what they're doing and relate that to the interviews afterwards.
I'd like to ask a question, a dialogical question for both Sarah and Bert, because I mean, so one way of phrasing, I think the background for that is so obviously Bert talked about values in terms of the social psychology. Here, at least in some cases, we look at readers on their own. So my question could be somewhere in between the two of you. So what kind of values are realized in reading? Is there a general question? Is there a general answer to that question? Or Bert, how would you approach reading? Or Sarah, how would you use your reading data to talk about values?
Oh my goodness. You want to go first?
Yes, please.
I'll tell you the way I would start about it. I haven't thought about it. It's fascinating to begin to think about it. Is a general set of epistemological values. That, I mean, when I first started thinking about values and getting interested, I actually was interested in the nature of science and how does what guides our scientific what we see, what we hope is progress. And it seems to me there are four values. There is we're trying to differentiate things that we haven't differentiated before. I call that clarity. We're trying to see relationships that we failed to see before, which is coherence. We're trying to expand. We're trying to see if those differences and those integrities can be expanded, and if they travel. If it works with this situation, will it work with another situation? And then I think the most interesting thing, and I think this is what ties into the reading and imagination and stuff, is complexity. This is the one that strikes people as the oddest one to claim, is that we like complex theories, because the standard claim is we like simple theories, parsimony. Is I think we actually like things that are multi-layered and paradoxical and that have the tensions built into it we were talking about earlier, that are dialectical or dialogical. I think it's that richness that opens up new worlds, new possibility spaces for us, that I think is that's what really engages and keeps people reading, I think. I was going to say earlier, I think so many of my students, I felt like, how do they read? They read for the test. They don't read to learn and stuff, and so they miss most of what's there to be got. So, Sarah, your turn.
Yeah, that sounded really, really nice, because I think that it's one of the problems. It is that reading is treated as a goal-oriented activity, like a problem-solving activity, and about decision making. Just, I mean, typical psychological terms at stake, and not as much as about the aesthetics and the values that we can't really. I don't know. I mean, we tried with the concept of imagination, but it's very difficult. It's like an immediate intuitive sensibility that is important, and that kind of engagement, and also how so many things seems important to whether it's an old book, whether it's a digital media, and all these kind of things seems to impact as well, and have so loaded or saturated with meaningfulness for the reader, and it impacts in so many ways. So I think I can just say that values realizing seems to be very important. I can't say what the values are. I'm not really sure I ever understood that completely. But we can definitely see that it's much more than rule following and goal orientation and problem solving. So, and that's the whole experiential basis that should be brought to fore, and how we apply social rules and expectations, and also how we use that to change ourselves. And I see that as a sort of values realizing that goes beyond the more traditional standard view of reading as a goal orientation activity.
Thank you for that collaborative answer. That was really, really nice. So this is a last short question and one short answer from you, Sarah, which has to do with so going beyond the book. So actually, it's two questions, but it's almost the same theme. So one question is from Dongping. Gosh, you must be up midnight in Hawaii. So anyway, how does cognitive ethnography work with online reading web pages, audiobooks, screen reading of PDF, etc.? And Eva Nagoska asks, what do you think about mixing media even more, e.g. by reading a book and showing an animation, let's say Beauty and the Beast, to children? Would it immerse them more if they read after watching, or demand less imagination as everything is already shown?
I have no idea about how to answer the last question. I mean, I really don't. I think it's a study worth.
Yes.
What I can say, and I think that's really crucial, is that, you know, being so one of the students say that she is constantly unable to be in a flow of reading, and she's constantly abrupted because she wants to have everything with, and she finds it difficult to be in that flow. And I think that takes time, and the more constraints you kind of try to move out of the setting, the better. So that is, for instance, to slow down, to be in a position where you aren't disturbed by many things, which you are often when you're on the digital media. And because I think it's so important for you, if imagination is the goal, I think it's so important that we take seriously the idea of being a composer, of being both a writer and a reader at the same time. And in order to do that, that takes time. So you have to, I mean, when you are listening to a podcast, or when you're watching a video, you don't have the time to be a composer in the same way, for instance. So I think that there is a lot of things to learn about slowing down. And we can see that both within the brain as also in the way that the body dynamics work, that we are affected deeply by that pace. And I think that there's something about the material engagement that's important, that the way that we have always worked with tools at hand that slows down the pace in a more ecological, normal pace somehow. So what we can do with a physical book, where we decide the page turning pace and stuff, like we can go back and forth, we can edit at the same time. I think that's important. And the digital media is probably good for many, many things. I'm not doubting that, but not for fueling imagination, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that was the end of the Q&A session. Thank you once again to Sarah and to Bert, and the whole world is applauding again. Yes. And so over to you, Joanna.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for you were doing this the first time probably, but it seemed like you have done it several times before. Thank you so much for all the questions. Some of them will definitely be tackled during the panel discussion. So right now there are those rooms waiting for you during the break. I know there is nothing as relaxing as staying glued to your computer screen for 3 hours in the row, so you are just hungry for more. And we are going to come back in 25 minutes with our speakers and the chairs in order to discuss some of the issues that appeared here in a deeper manner. So if you feel that there are questions that coalesce in a similar topic or in one topic, you can suggest it for us for the panel discussions. Thank you. And we are suspending the transmission for 25 minutes now.